My face burned with shame as I tried to rise from the dirt, surrounded by loud laughter. These weren't bullies, this was my family. My own sister had just kicked the crutch out from under my arm, screaming, "Stop faking it. Get up, you're just a pathetic leech." I looked at my father, begging for help, but he just flipped a burger on the grill, pretending I didn't exist. They thought they had broken me, but they didn't know that standing right behind them was a man whose 6 words were about to destroy their lives forever. I'm Elena Ross, 32 years old, and for the last 2 years, a pair of titanium forearm crutches has been the only thing keeping me upright after a highway collision shattered my spine. But on a humid Saturday afternoon at my father's retirement barbecue in the suburbs of Austin, Texas, gravity wasn't the force that brought me down. My sister, Bianca, intercepted me as I crossed the lawn. With a sudden, violent jerk, she snatched the right crutch from under my arm and screamed, "Cut the act, Elena. You're just a leech." I crumbled onto the St. Augustine grass, the impact jarring my teeth, my face instantly hot with humiliation. Around me, the festive atmosphere curdled. Relatives didn't gasp in horror, they erupted in laughter. I looked up to see phones raised, camera lenses staring down at me like the unblinking eyes of vultures. My cousins were recording my struggle as if it were a roadside sideshow. Their amusement stung far worse than the fall. I looked for Bianca, catching that familiar, narrowed glare she had directed at me since childhood, a look of deep-seated suspicion I had never fully deciphered. Beside me, my best friend Sarah stood frozen, her hand clamped over her mouth in shock. I wanted to scream, to rattle off the medical diagnosis that defined my life now, but the jeers of the crowd suffocated my voice. The betrayal was a physical blow, heavy and sharp. It wasn't just Bianca, it was everyone who found entertainment in my pain. I had faced skepticism before, but never like this. Not from blood. Not with an audience. The backyard was thick with the scent of mesquite smoke and the noise of children chasing each other between the picnic tables. Bianca marched to the center of the lawn, her voice slicing through the humid air. "Elena is faking this disability to drain mom and dad's accounts," she announced, thrusting a finger in my direction. "I'm the one stuck taking care of them while she plays the victim and cashes in." Her words landed like a physical slap. Heads turned. A murmur of agreement rippled through the guests. My Aunt March kept her phone raised, recording every second, a smirk playing on her lips. My cousin Chloe, who had always been Bianca's shadow, let out a sharp, cruel laugh, egging her on. Then, my cousin Lucas chimed in, stepping forward with a beer in hand. "I saw her at the rehab center last week," he announced loudly. "She wasn't using crutches. She was just holding onto the wall." My stomach knotted. Lucas had seen me during a grueling physical therapy session, catching a fleeting moment where I was practicing balance for mere seconds. I opened my mouth to defend myself, my voice trembling. "That was therapy," I managed to choke out. "It's part of the recovery. I can't walk without." "Don't lie to us, Elena," Aunt March cut in, her tone dripping with disdain. The collective gaze of the family bore into me. I felt like a specimen pinned under glass, every twitch judged and found wanting. I looked desperately for my parents. Mom stood near the cooler, her eyes fixed intently on the grass, as if studying the lawn would preserve the family's dignity. Dad was at the grill, flipping brisket, his back turned to me. He laughed at a neighbor's joke, completely ignoring the dismantling of his daughter's character a few feet away. Their silence was a weapon more effective than Bianca's shouting. Sarah, standing beside me now, squeezed my hand hard. I noticed she had angled her phone, discreetly capturing the scene. I tried to steady my breathing, but the weight of their collective distrust was crushing, isolating me in a sea of faces I had known my entire life. Bianca began to pace, her voice rising as she recounted a fabricated history of how my medical bills were destroying our parents' retirement plans. "She's been milking this for years," Bianca spat, gesturing wildly. Chloe clapped her hands as if applauding a performance, while Anmaja's camera remained trained on my face, waiting for a slip-up. I wanted to scream, to force them to look at the MRI scans, but my words felt trapped in my throat. Lucas doubled down on his claim. "She looked fine at the clinic, I swear. Walking just like the rest of us." His confidence fueled the crowd's murmurs. I saw aunts and uncles shaking their heads, their skepticism hardening into conviction. I leaned heavily on my remaining crutch, my knuckles turning white from the strain. "The accident crushed my vertebrae," I said, projecting my voice this time. "Therapy is the only reason I can stand at all." My plea fell flat, drowned out by Chloe's snickering and Anmaj muttering, "Sure, honey, that's what the script says." Mom's shoulders slumped further, her silence building an impenetrable wall between us. Dad took a sip of his beer, oblivious, or choosing to be oblivious, to the storm tearing his family apart. Sarah's grip tightened. Her quiet strength was the only thing tethering me to the earth. The accusations kept coming, each one more vicious than the last. Bianca claimed I had planned the crutches as a prop to guilt our parents into funding my lifestyle. Her narrative painted me not as a survivor fighting to reclaim her mobility, but as a con artist. Lucas nodded along, repeating his story about the clinic to anyone who would listen. Anmaja's phone didn't waver, capturing every flinch, every tear I tried to hold back. I felt the crowd closing in, there. Judgment sucking the oxygen out of the air. I scanned the sea of faces surrounding me, desperate for a single ally, one pair of eyes that held empathy rather than judgment. Mom wouldn't meet my gaze. She studied the condensation on her iced tea glass, her desperate need to keep the peace outweighing her duty as my protector. Dad tossed another burger onto the grill, the hiss of rendering fat the only sound he seemed willing to acknowledge. His back was a wall of indifference. Beside me, Sarah leaned in, her voice a low, steady thread in the unraveling tapestry of the afternoon. "We are going to fix this," she whispered. I clung to her promise, but the isolation felt physical, a heavy blanket of humidity and hostility that separated me from the people who shared my blood. Bianca's voice rose to a screeching crescendo, her fingers stabbing the air as she demanded I confess to the scam. Her accusations echoed off the wooden fence, drawing the attention of neighbors 3 yards over. I opened my mouth, adrenaline surging, ready to fight back with everything I had left, when a shadow detached itself from the periphery of the crowd. Someone had been watching. Someone who knew the reality of my life. A calm, authoritative presence stepped into the circle. Dr. Marcus Thorne, a man who had been my father's golf partner for 20 years and my physical therapist for the last 2, moved with a quiet gravity that instantly sucked the air out of the room. He placed a heavy hand on Bianca's shoulder, stopping her mid-tirade. "She isn't faking, Bianca. And I can prove it." His 6 words sliced through the tension like a scalpel. The backyard, moments ago a cacophony of jeers and laughter, fell into a silence so profound I could hear the hum of the pool filter. Relatives froze, their expressions caught in a grotesque transition between amusement and confusion. Aunt March lowered her phone, the smirk sliding off her face like wet clay. Chloe pressed a hand to her mouth, her cruel laughter choked off. Dr. Thorne didn't shout. He simply retrieved his phone from his pocket, his movements deliberate and slow. "I record my patients' sessions to analyze their gait and track biomechanical progress," he explained, his voice level but carrying a hard edge. "This was taken on Tuesday." He tapped the screen and turned the device outward, holding it high enough for the circle to see. The video played. It showed me in the sterile light of his clinic, sweat matting my hair to my forehead, my face contorted in concentration and pain. On the small screen, I was struggling to drag my legs forward, my muscles trembling violently with the effort of a single, shuffling step. It was a raw, unvarnished look at a body at war with itself. The crowd leaned in, eyes glued to the footage. The contrast between the trembling woman on the screen and the con artist Bianca had painted was stark and undeniable. "The truth is right there," Dr. Thorne said, his gaze sweeping over my family. "I have the MRIs and the surgical logs if anyone requires further evidence." Bianca's face went pale, her bravado crumbling into dust. I was just trying to protect the family," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "I thought." Her excuse rang hollow, dissolving in the heavy Texas air. No one came to her defense. Aunt March shifted uncomfortably, sliding her phone into her purse as if the device itself were guilty. Lucas, who had sworn on his life that he'd seen me walking freely, stood rigid, his certainty shattered. The shock in the yard was palpable, the earlier judgment replaced by a thick, suffocating guilt. I stared at the video on Dr. Thorne's phone, a wave of relief washing over me so powerful my knees nearly buckled. For years, I had fought a silent war to prove my pain was real. Now, finally, the evidence was undeniable. But as the relief settled, it curdled into anger. Hot, sharp anger at Bianca for leading this crusade, and at my family for being so eager to join her. Why had it taken the word of an outsider, a man in a polo shirt, to make them see what I had been screaming for years? Sarah squeezed my hand, her grip fierce enough to bruise. "They're going to regret this," she whispered, her tone low and lethal. I nodded, my jaw tight. Dr. Thorne paused the video and looked at my father, who had finally turned away from the grill. "Elena's injury is catastrophic," Dr. Thorne said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Her spinal damage requires agonizing, daily therapy. She fights harder in a single morning than most of you do in a lifetime." His words landed like a verdict. Aunt March looked at her shoes. Chloe's expression was unreadable, her eyes wide. Bianca tried to speak again, but the words stumbled out. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," she said, looking toward Mom for support. But Mom stood frozen, her face a mask of mortification. She had stayed silent to keep the peace, and now that silence hung between us, a betrayal far worse than any accusation. Dad looked at me, his brow furrowed, but he said nothing. Their inaction burned. It was a stark reminder that in this family, I was alone. "This isn't just about proving them wrong," Sarah whispered to me. "It's about justice." Dr. Thorne turned to me, his eyes softening. "You don't have to stay here, Elena," he said gently. I nodded, adjusting my grip on my crutch. The weight of the moment settled in my chest. The crowd parted slightly, creating a path to the gate. Their faces were a blur of regret and discomfort, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Bianca reached out a trembling hand as I took a step. "Elle, please," she started. I shook my head, my voice steady for the first time all day. "You've said enough, Bianca." Her hand fell to her side, tears welling in her eyes. The video had done more than prove my disability, it had exposed the rot at the center of our family dynamic. I felt lighter, unburdened by their skepticism, but the anger remained, sharp and unyielding. "Let's get you out of here," Dr. Thorne said, gesturing toward the driveway. I took a step, the rubber tip of my crutch biting into the grass. My family's faces faded into the background, their judgment no longer a weight I had to carry. I was ready to leave them behind. Dr. Thorne guided me toward his sedan, Sarah flanking me like a bodyguard. The gravel of the driveway crunched under my crutches, a rhythmic sound of departure. "You don't need them," Sarah said, her voice soft but unyielding. "You have me." "Elena, wait." Bianca's footsteps hurried across the lawn behind us. Her tone was desperate, the sound of someone realizing they had pushed too far. I paused, gripping the handle of the car door, and turned to face her. Her face was flushed, her eyes wide with panic. "I was only trying to help Mom and Dad," she pleaded, her words rushing out. "You know how stressed they are about money. I thought I was doing the right thing." It was a dodge. A flimsy shield to protect her own ego. I shook my head. "You're wrong, Bianca. But honestly, it's not your fault you're like this." Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. I turned away, sliding into the backseat of Dr. Thorne's car. Sarah settled in beside me. As we pulled away, I glanced back one last time. Mom was still standing by the cooler, head bowed, more concerned with the scandal than her daughter's heart. Dad was back at the grill, chatting with a neighbor, his laughter jarring and fake. Their silence wasn't just neglect, it was a choice. "Did you get it?" I asked Sarah as the car turned onto the main road, the Austin skyline shimmering in the distance. "Every second," she said, tapping her phone pocket. "And Marge didn't delete her video either, but mine is better." A resolve hardened in my chest. My family had ignored the truth for too long, dismissing my struggle as a ploy for attention. I couldn't let that stand. "Dr. Thorne," I said, looking at the rearview mirror. "Can you drop us at the hospital? I want a record that the fall didn't cause new damage." "Of course," he said, meeting my eyes in the mirror. I pulled out my phone. My hands were steady now. I opened the browser and typed 2 words, defamation lawyer. Sarah watched me, a slow smile spreading across her face. "I know someone," she said. "Lisa Donovan. She specializes in disability rights. She's a shark." I dialed the number. When the receptionist answered, my voice was sharp, professional, and entirely my own. I wasn't a victim in the backyard anymore. I was a woman with evidence, and I was done being silent. Dr. Thorne gestured toward the driveway gate, his voice dropping to a low rumble. "Let's get you out of here, Elena." I took a step, planting my crutch firmly on the uneven turf. The faces of my family began to blur into the background, their judgment no longer a weight I was willing to carry. I was ready to leave this life behind. Dr. Thorne guided me toward his sedan, his hand hovering protectively near my elbow, while Sarah walked in lockstep beside me, her eyes fierce with loyalty. "You don't need them," Sarah said, her voice soft but unyielding. "You never did." Her words anchored me, cutting through the lingering chaos of the afternoon. But before we reached the car, footsteps hurried across the grass behind us. "Elle, wait!" Bianca called out, her tone desperate. I paused, gripping the handle of my crutch until my knuckles ached, and turned to face her. Her face was flushed, her eyes wide and searching. "I was only trying to help Mom and Dad," she rushed out, breathless. "You know how much I do for them, how much pressure I'm under." Her excuse felt like a dodge, a flimsy shield constructed to protect her own conscience. I shook my head, my voice steadying despite the storm raging inside me. "You're wrong, Bianca," I said quietly. "But I realized something today. It's not even your fault anymore. You believe your own lies. Her mouth opened, then closed, her hands falling limp at her sides. I turned away, the weight of her presence fading as I moved toward the car. The crowd of relatives stood frozen near the patio, their earlier confidence replaced by a palpable discomfort. Aunt March clutched her phone to her chest. The video she had recorded was still safe there, a silent, digital threat. A few cousins averted their eyes, their faces tight with unease. Chloe and Lucas stood among them, silent now, their earlier accusations a distant echo. Dr. Thorne opened the rear door, his expression calm but resolute. "We'll get you checked at St. David's," he said, his voice a quiet reassurance. "Just to be safe." I nodded, sliding into the back seat, Sarah settling in beside me. As the car pulled away, I glanced back at the backyard one last time. Mom stood by the cooler, her head bowed, more concerned with avoiding a neighborhood scandal than defending her daughter. Dad remained at the grill, chatting with a neighbor, his forced laughter jarring against the tension. Their silence wasn't just neglect. It was a choice. A choice that cut deeper than any of Bianca's screaming. The drive to the hospital was short, the city lights of Austin blurring past the window. Sarah leaned close, her voice low. "Marge didn't delete her video, but I have mine," she said, patting her pocket. "Every second of it. We have the truth." Her words sparked something in me, a resolve I hadn't felt before. My family had ignored the reality of my life for too long, dismissing my struggle as a ploy. I couldn't let that continue. At the hospital, Dr. Thorne ran a quick check, confirming that the fall hadn't caused any new spinal damage. His professional kindness, so different from my family's indifference, steadied me. While sitting in the exam room, waiting for discharge papers, I pulled out my phone. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I typed 2 words into the search bar: defamation lawyer. Sarah scrolled through her contacts, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I know exactly who to call," she said, tapping a name. "Lisa Donovan. She's fierce. She specializes in disability rights cases." I dialed the number. When Lisa answered, her voice was sharp, professional, and commanding. I explained the ambush at the barbecue, my sister's public accusations, and the video evidence Sarah had captured. Lisa listened, her questions precise and cutting. "This sounds like a clear case of harassment and defamation of character," she said. "Given the public nature of the incident and the recording, we can file a civil suit for emotional distress and potential financial damages." I hung up, my decision made. The hesitation that had plagued me for years was gone. "I'm doing this," I told Sarah, my voice firm. "I'm suing her." Sarah nodded, her eyes gleaming with approval. "I'll be your witness," she said, resting her hand over mine. "Whatever you need." The choice felt right. It was a step toward reclaiming my dignity. Bianca's actions weren't just a momentary lapse of judgment, they were a pattern enabled by my family's refusal to truly see me. Mom's desperate need to keep the peace had allowed years of doubt to fester. Her silence was a tacit agreement with Bianca's suspicions. Dad's carefree attitude, his focus on his guests over his injured child, was its own kind of dismissal. I thought back to the spectacle in the yard, to the faces of my relatives and their quickness to judge. Marge's video, still undeleted, was a reminder of their complicity. Chloe's laughter, Lucas's false testimony, they had all played a part. But Sarah's video was my weapon, a record of the truth they had tried to bury. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. This was about every moment I had been doubted, every time my pain had been called a lie. Dr. Thorne returned, clipboard in hand. "You're cleared to go, Elena," he said, his eyes kind. "But take it easy for a few days." I thanked him, my resolve hardening into concrete. Sarah helped me to the car, her presence a constant reminder that I wasn't alone. As we drove back into the night, I felt a shift inside me. The incident had exposed my family's flaws, but it had also ignited something new, a determination to hold them accountable. The incident at the barbecue didn't just expose the cracks in my family, it shattered the facade entirely, revealing the rot underneath. But in the wreckage, something new had ignited, a cold, hard determination to hold them accountable. Lisa's legal terminology echoed in my mind: harassment, defamation, damages. These weren't just abstract concepts anymore. They were the tools I would use to carve out a path to justice. Bianca had crossed a line, and my parents had stood by and watched. I wasn't seeking revenge for the sake of cruelty, but I needed them to understand that their silence had a price. Sarah glanced at me from the passenger seat, her expression fierce. "We've got this," she said, her voice sounding like a solemn vow. I nodded, my heart beating with a steady, unfamiliar rhythm. The fight was just beginning. 3 days later, the police knocked on Bianca's door. Detective Ray Vance stood on her front porch, his badge glinting in the harsh Texas sunlight. He wasn't there for a friendly chat. He questioned my sister about the incident, citing potential charges regarding the assault of a disabled person and the malicious spread of falsehoods. The video Sarah had recorded was now in police custody, a digital witness that showed every detail: the snatching of the crutch, the fall, the accusations, and the crowd's jeering laughter. According to Sarah, who heard the details later through the neighborhood grapevine, Vance's voice was steady and unyielding as he explained the gravity of the allegations, his notebook filling with observations. Bianca's face, usually composed in a mask of superior confidence, crumbled into disbelief. She was replaced by a trembling, silent woman who realized she had lost control of the narrative. Back at my apartment, I met with Lisa Donovan. She had moved quickly, filing a civil lawsuit against Bianca seeking compensation for emotional distress, reputational damage, and financial losses tied to the incident. "The video is airtight," Lisa said, her eyes sharp behind her wire-rimmed glasses. "It proves intent, and it proves harm. There is no ambiguity here." I nodded, the weight of her words settling into my bones. This wasn't just about a settlement check. It was about forcing my sister to stand in a courtroom and face the consequences of her cruelty. Lisa outlined the next steps: discovery, depositions, a potential court date. The process sounded exhausting, a mountain of paperwork and confrontation, but I was ready to climb it. That evening, my phone buzzed. It was Mom. Her voice was strained, thin with anxiety. "Don't sue your sister, Elena," she pleaded, skipping the pleasantries. "I'm terrified this is going to tear our family apart." Her words stung, but not in the way she intended. They were a bitter reminder of all the times she had stayed quiet, letting Bianca's doubts fester just to avoid an uncomfortable dinner conversation. I took a deep breath, gripping the phone tight. "Mom, you chose peace over me for years. You watched me fall and did nothing. I can't keep pretending that's okay." She went silent. The line crackled with the distance between us, a chasm she had helped dig. Then, she hung up. Her absence in that moment spoke louder than any argument we could have had. Sarah came over an hour later, bringing takeout and her unshakable support. Over steaming mugs of tea, she opened up about her own past, a time when her family had ostracized her for choosing a career in design over the traditional path they had mapped out for her. They had called her selfish, ungrateful. "It hurts like hell," she said, her eyes steady over the rim of her mug. "But you learn to stand tall on your own 2 feet, even if they're shaky. You're doing that now." Her words bolstered me, a necessary reminder that strength wasn't about the absence of pain, but the will to face it head-on. I thanked her, my resolve hardening. She had already agreed to testify, her video serving as the cornerstone of our case. My phone pinged with messages from Aunt March and Cousin Lucas. Both were asking how I was doing, their texts polite, cautious, and completely devoid of real accountability. They were testing the waters, seeing if I was still the pliable, quiet cousin they could ignore. I left the messages unread. I was done engaging with half-hearted gestures. Instead, I threw myself into physical therapy. I pushed through my exercises with a focus I hadn't felt since before the accident. Each step on the parallel bars, each stretch of my damaged back, was a reclaiming of my body, a physical defiance of the doubts that had haunted me. Dr. Thorne noticed the change. He offered a quiet nod during one particularly grueling session, a small but significant victory. In the quiet of my evenings, unable to sleep, I started a blog. At first, it was just a mechanism to process the trauma of the barbecue, a way to put words to the sting of being misunderstood by my own blood. I wrote about the moment I hit the grass, not with shame, but with forensic clarity. I described how the fall exposed the fragility of trust. I wrote about the crushing weight of Mom's silence, Dad's indifference at the grill, and the crowd's eagerness to turn my pain into entertainment. The words poured out, raw and unfiltered. Each post felt like a step toward healing, a way to purge the poison from my system. I didn't expect anyone to read it, I just needed to get it out of my head. The blog became my refuge, a digital sanctuary where I could be honest without fear of interruption or contradiction. I wrote about the lawsuit, careful not to divulge legal specifics, but framing it as a necessary choice to stand up for my dignity. I shared the exhaustion of therapy, the small, hard-won triumphs of progress, and the deep ache of watching family ties fray and snap. Each entry felt like a stitch mending the parts of me that had been torn open. Sarah read every post, her comments full of fierce encouragement. "You're turning pain into power," she wrote under one entry. I clung to that idea, letting it guide me through the dark nights. The investigation into Bianca continued. Detective Vance called me with updates. He had interviewed witnesses from the party, and their accounts were aligning perfectly with Sarah's video. The wall of silence my family usually erected was crumbling under the pressure of legal scrutiny. Lisa prepared documents, her confidence a steady anchor in the storm. I kept my focus narrow, therapy and writing. The blog grew into a ritual of release. My family's messages, from March, from Lucas, even a follow-up text from Mom, faded into the background noise of my life. Their words were, "Too little, too late." I realized, with a start, that I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the white-hot, consuming way I had been that afternoon on the lawn. Instead, I felt a quiet strength, a cool certainty that I was finally on the right path. The lawsuit wasn't just about punishing Bianca. It was about dismantling the system that had allowed her to hurt me. It was about every time I had been dismissed, every doubt I had been forced to disprove. Writing the blog helped me see that. It helped me turn my story into something bigger than myself. I began to feel whole again, not because of my family, but in spite of them. Sarah's story and her unwavering presence were the reminders I needed. I wasn't alone. And soon, the world would know it, too. The video didn't just leak, it detonated. Sarah had uploaded the footage to a burner account, tagging a few local advocacy groups, but the algorithm took over from there. Within 48 hours, the clip had jumped platforms, racking up hundreds of thousands of views. The hashtags #disabilityrights and #invisibleness began trending, with the comment sections transforming into a global jury condemning the cruelty captured on screen. Bianca's life unraveled with terrifying speed. The internet sleuths identified her within a day. Her employer, a regional bank in downtown Austin known for its conservative image, didn't hesitate. Citing a reputational risk clause in her contract, they terminated her employment immediately. They were unwilling to associate their brand with a woman now infamous for mocking the disabled. Her social circle, usually a fortress of brunch dates and charity galas, crumbled. Friends who had once filled her calendar suddenly went silent, their texts drying up as they distanced themselves from the fallout. The online backlash was relentless, painting Bianca as a symbol of privileged ignorance. But she wasn't the only one facing a reckoning. Anne March found herself in the crosshairs as well. Commenters zeroed in on her smirk and the way she held her phone like a weapon, calling her complicity heartless. Her Facebook page, once a shrine to her perfect family life, was bombarded with criticism until she was forced to lock it down. But the judgment followed her into the real world. Rumors swirled that she had been asked to step down from her committee position at the local country club. Then came the letter from my cousin Chloe. It arrived in my mailbox a week later, the handwriting on the envelope shaky and unfamiliar. "I was wrong to join in," she wrote, admitting she had been swept up in the mob mentality of the moment. "I was scared to go against Bianca, but that's no excuse. I hope you can eventually forgive me." The words seemed sincere, stripped of the usual family defensiveness, but I wasn't ready to respond. The wound was still too raw, and trust, once pulverized, doesn't reassemble itself with a simple apology. I set the letter aside, unanswered. I also declined every reporter who called. My voicemail filled up with requests from local news stations and even a producer from a national morning show. They wanted the human interest angle, the tearful victim story. I refused to give it to them. The spotlight wasn't what I wanted. I wanted control over my own narrative. Instead, I poured my energy into the blog. I crafted posts about the reality of living with a disability in a world designed for the able-bodied, and the quick to judge. I wrote about the small, invisible victories, managing a new core exercise without collapsing, navigating a grocery store aisle not built for crutches, and the larger, heavier battles of facing a family who doubted my truth. The blog stopped being just a diary. It became a platform. "You're stronger than ever, Elena," Dr. Thorne said during my next session, watching as I held a plank position longer than I ever had before. "Your balance has improved significantly." His praise felt like a milestone, tangible proof that my focus was paying off. Each therapy session became a step toward reclaiming my body, a quiet, physical defiance of the skepticism I had endured. My physical progress mirrored the mental clarity I found in writing. Each post sharpened my sense of purpose. Readers began finding the site. At first, it was a trickle, then a flood. A woman in Ohio with chronic fatigue syndrome thanked me for articulating the exhaustion of constantly having to prove her sickness. A veteran in San Antonio shared how his own family had questioned his need for a service dog. "You are a voice for the invisible," one reader commented. The phrase stuck with me, fueling my drive to keep typing. Strangers were becoming a community, their stories weaving into mine to create a tapestry of shared resilience. The attention was humbling, but it didn't erase the silence from my parents. Mom's phone call still echoed in my mind, her plea to protect Bianca, a stark reminder of where her loyalty lay. Dad's silence was a wall I couldn't breach. Even Chloe's letter, though honest, couldn't undo years of doubt. I realized I didn't hate them, but I wasn't ready to rebuild what they had broken. My purpose now lay elsewhere, in the readers who found strength in my story, and in the therapy sessions that pushed me forward. Sarah remained my anchor. She checked in constantly, bringing Thai takeout and stories about her dating life to lighten the mood. "You're building something real here," she said one night, scrolling through the comments section of my latest post. "Look at these people. You're helping them." Her belief in me was unshakable, a stark contrast to the family who had faltered. She had faced her own battles, she reminded me, and had come out the other side stronger. Her words were a guide, urging me to keep going. The legal machinery continued to turn. Lisa Donovan sent me crisp, professional emails updating me on the case. Detective Vance's investigation had gathered enough evidence to support the charges, and the civil suit was gaining traction. But strangely, the legal fight began to feel secondary to the blog. The courtroom was about punishment, the writing was about power. Writing was a way to reshape the narrative Bianca had tried to control. Each post was a declaration that my voice mattered, that my disability wasn't a lie to be exposed, but a reality to be respected. The online storm showed no signs of slowing. Bianca's name had become a cautionary tale in Austin social circles, a warning against the arrogance of judging what you don't understand. Marge's reputation had taken a hit she couldn't laugh off. Chloe's letter sat on my desk, a decision for another day. "For now," I wrote. I moved. I grew. The blog gave me a purpose I hadn't expected, a way to turn my pain into connection. I was no longer defined by my family's doubts. I was defined by my own truth. It was nearly 4 months later when I saw Bianca at the rehabilitation center. The familiar, rhythmic clanking of weight machines and the hum of treadmills filled the air as I adjusted the cuffs of my crutches, mentally preparing for late day. My sister was standing near the reception desk, wearing a bright blue volunteer vest, her hair pulled back into a severe, practical bun. Our eyes met across the room, and for a split second, the sprawling gym seemed to shrink down to just the two of us. She hesitated, then walked toward me, her steps tentative, lacking the aggressive confidence she used to carry like a shield. "I'm trying to understand," she said, her voice low, gesturing vaguely around the clinic. "The pain. The work you have to do." I wanted to see it. Her words hung in the air between us, earnest but heavy with an expectation of absolution. She was trying to breach the canyon she had dynamited, using a volunteer badge as a rope. I steadied myself, my grip firm on the rubber handles of my crutches. "That's good, Bianca," I said, my tone even and cool. "But this isn't about you." Without waiting for a response, I turned toward the therapy mats, my focus already shifting to the glute bridges and balance drills ahead. I didn't look back. The weight of her presence faded with every step I took away from her. Sarah, who had driven me to the appointment, caught up to me near the parallel bus, her eyes bright with approval. "You handled that perfectly," she murmured, handing me my water bottle. "Total ice queen. I love it." Her support was a quiet strength, a constant reminder that I didn't need my sister's performative penance to move forward. In the therapy room, I pushed through my routine with a ferocity that surprised even me. Each movement was a testament to my resilience. My blog had become a lifeline, its words connecting me to a world of people who understood the journey of recovery. Emails from readers, people with disabilities, chronic illnesses, and invisible struggles, poured in daily. A sophomore at UT Austin wrote to me about hiding her multiple sclerosis diagnosis to avoid judgment from her sorority sisters. A combat veteran from Killeen shared how my post gave him the courage to finally use his cane in public. Their stories wove into mine, creating a tapestry of shared strength. I wasn't alone anymore. I wasn't the isolated girl at the barbecue surrounded by family yet completely unseen. Back at my apartment that evening, I found a text from Mom. "How is your health, sweetheart?" I stared at the screen. The message was a faint, static-filled echo of connection. It was polite, safe, and completely devoid of substance. She hadn't asked me to drop the lawsuit again, but her silence during those years of doubt still lingered between the lines. I set the phone down on the coffee table, leaving the text unanswered. Keeping my distance wasn't an act of anger anymore. It was clarity. It was a choice to protect the life I was building. My family's absence no longer defined me. My readers, my writing, and my physical progress did. Dr. Thorne noticed a shift during our sessions. "You're carrying yourself differently," he remarked one afternoon, watching me navigate a complex balance exercise on the wobble board. "And I don't just mean your posture." His words reflected the certainty I had found in my own voice. The blog had given me a platform where my truth didn't need defending, it just existed. I wrote a post about that session at the clinic. I didn't mention Bianca or her blue vest. Instead, I focused on the grind of recovery, the sweat, and the small, hard-won triumphs of the day. The comment section turned into a chorus of encouragement. Sarah often joined me at the clinic now, her presence a steady comfort. Over iced coffee after a grueling session, she grinned, scrolling through the latest responses on my phone. "You're unstoppable, Elle," she said, her pride evident. She had been there through every step, from the humiliation on the lawn to the legal battles, never wavering. Her belief in me mirrored the support I found online, a community that saw me for who I was, not what my family assumed I was. The lawsuit was still ongoing, of course. Lisa Donovan sent regular updates, her emails detailing depositions and evidence submission, but for me, the legal fight had become background noise. My focus stayed locked on writing and therapy. The blog grew steadily, its reach expanding beyond what I had ever imagined. A reader from Chicago invited me to speak via Zoom to a disability advocacy group. Another sent a handwritten letter on floral stationery, thanking me for making her feel seen for the first time in years. Each message was a spark, fueling my drive to keep sharing. I realized I didn't need Bianca's understanding or Mom's tentative, guilt-ridden texts to feel whole. My confidence came from within, built on the words I wrote and the people who read them. The clinic, once a place of struggle and pain, had become a symbol of my strength. Each session was proof that I was moving forward. Bianca's volunteering didn't change that. Her attempt to connect felt like too little, too late, a gesture that couldn't erase the past. I didn't wish her ill, but I didn't owe her my time. Mom's message sat unanswered, a reminder that some bridges stay broken, not out of spite, but out of necessity. My life was full. Therapy, writing, readers, Sarah. I was enough. Not because of my family, but because of the path I had carved for myself. The world had opened up, and I was ready for what came next. The world had opened up, and I was finally ready for what came next. A year later, my blog won a Community Excellence Award. The Texas Advocacy Network honored my writing for raising awareness with raw honesty and tangible impact. I stood on the stage of a small auditorium in downtown Austin, clutching a heavy glass plaque, the cool weight of it grounding me in the moment. The applause from the audience, advocates, allies, and survivors, felt like a warm, enveloping embrace. It was a stark, beautiful contrast to the silence I had once endured from my own blood. My journey, once defined by doubt and dismissal, had led me here, to a moment of recognition that wasn't just mine, but shared with every reader who had found a fragment of strength in my words. Back at my apartment that evening, the adrenaline fading, my phone rang. It was Mom. Her voice came through the line, tentative but earnest, stripped of its usual defensive edge. "I want to make things right, Elena." "No excuses this time," she said, choosing her words carefully. "Please, come to the family gathering next week. We miss you." I let the invitation hang in the air, stirring memories of backyard grills and judgment-filled glances. My cousin Chloe had apologized months ago, and a few other cousins had reached out with sincere regret. But the rest, Bianca, and March, the core of the family, remained silent. Their absence spoke louder than Mom's singular gesture. "I need peace, Mom," I replied, my voice steady and calm. "Not another gathering filled with judgment." Mom didn't argue. She let out a heavy sigh, the sound of resignation, before the line went dead. I placed the phone down and turned back to my laptop, where my blog was open on the screen. Writing had become my refuge, a space to advocate for disability rights and share the hard truths that polite society often overlooked. I posted a photo of the award, not to boast, but to celebrate the community that had lifted me up, the readers, the advocates, and the strangers who had become my allies. The comments flooded in immediately, each one a reminder that my voice mattered. A teenager with cerebral palsy wrote that my posts helped her face the stairs in her high school hallway with her head held high. An older man shared how my words pushed him to demand better accessibility ramps at his local library. Their stories fueled my resolve, a fire that burned brighter and cleaner than any family obligation ever could. The freedom of living authentically was exhilarating. I no longer carried the crushing burden of trying to prove my existence to people committed to misunderstanding me. Bianca's accusations, once a jagged, bleeding wound, had faded into a dull, distant ache. Her awkward attempt to understand me at the clinic hadn't changed my path, it had only clarified it. Mom's call, Chloe's letter, they were steps, certainly, but they weren't enough to drag me back into a world that had dismissed me for so long. I was stronger now. Not because I had forgiven them, but because I had chosen myself. Physical therapy remained a cornerstone of my life. Each session was a quiet victory. Dr. Thorne, ever the stoic, remarked on my progress during our last appointment, noting the new fluidity in my movements. The blog and the therapy were intertwined, two spaces where I rebuilt myself, piece by piece. Writing gave me clarity, therapy gave me strength. Together, they had carried me through the wreckage of my family ties and into a life where I defined my own worth. Reflecting on the journey, I finally saw the true cause of those toxic bonds. The barbecue where I fell, the accusations, the collective silence, they had been heavy, traumatic moments, but they had also been a catalyst. Severing those ties hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. I used to think family was everything, that their approval was the anchor holding me safe in the harbor. Now I knew better. Sometimes, you have to cut the anchor to keep the ship from sinking. My strength came from within, from the community I had found, and from the truth I had claimed. I was free, not because I had won their acceptance, but because I no longer needed it. The award sat on my shelf, catching the afternoon light, a symbol of what I had built from the ashes. But the real victory was the life I was living now, one of purpose, advocacy, and unapologetic truth. I kept writing. Each post was a step forward. Each reader was a connection that made the world feel a little less lonely. Sarah, my constant through the storm, celebrated with me, her laughter a reminder of the bonds that actually mattered. The lawsuit had faded into the background, its outcome was less important than the voice I had found in the process. Looking back, I realized the lesson wasn't just for me. It was for anyone who had been doubted, dismissed, or forced to justify their pain. Your truth is enough, I typed in my final post of the year. You don't need to carry the weight of other people's skepticism. Find your voice, build your community, and let go of what holds you back. Strength isn't found in staying and enduring, it's found in choosing yourself. That was the heart of my story. It wasn't a tale of revenge. It was a story of resilience, of finding freedom in the act of letting go. I closed my laptop. The screen went dark, but my heart felt light. The world was mine to shape, and for the first time, I was ready.